Welcome to Sanity, a podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-hosts, Rebecca Sugar, we make sense out of the nonsense and bring a little bit of sanity to your week.
All right, the quote this week is from the late Walter Heller, who was an economist and an advisor to Presidents Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. He said, "An economist is a man who, when he finds something works in practice, wonders if it works in theory." And Ronald Reagan actually gave us like a version of that several years later. And it's become kind of a joke in the, I'm told, in the world of economists, which I don't live in, but I'm told that this is like a meme almost. And it seemed appropriate this week, given all the good news that's coming out in the economy and Trump's tariff deals. A lot of economists and others predicted that the tariffs would tank the economy. And what we're seeing is little to no inflation, the economy doing really well. Consumer confidence has been rising. So a lot of people who formerly criticized the tariffs are, now publicly saying that maybe they were wrong, or at least wrong in the short term. Non-economist Bill Maher's, amongst the most prominent, who's spoken out about this. So you and I talked about the tariffs when they were announced, and we both admitted that we're not economists ourselves. But I didn't really know what to make of them at the time. I kind of went back and forth between the Batya Ungar-Sargon version of "hooray, the tariffs are great," and the Thomas Sowell version of "tariffs are terrible." Yeah. And now I'm kind of where I think a lot of other people are, and where maybe Walter Heller is, which is it's whatever it is, it's working for now.
Yeah, I think it was another economist, John Maynard Keynes, who said, I could be wrong, so do fact check me, but who said, in the long run, we're all dead. So, the question of, we'll see. But certainly Jason Furman, the kind of Obama economist, had a piece in the Times, I think it was yesterday, saying, sort of admitting that, why did these predictions of catastrophe not sort of materialize? I guess the next phase of this is these trade deals, and seeing how they evolve, and once they take root, what they yield, whether it's with South Korea, Japan, or of course the huge one with the EU. But it's definitely deal-orama on the trade front. Okay, so we might come back to that, but we have a busy program today. We're going to start off with talking about the shooting that happened here in New York, about 30 seconds from where I'm sitting right now, here in the offices of the New York Sun, just across the street at the Blackstone offices. We're also going to talk about a very fast-moving story, and that is sort of the diplomatic drama and developments over Israel both at the UN and elsewhere, and we'll share some thoughts about that. Our Make It Make Sense section we could rename it the Strange Bedfellows section. We'll be talking about the Monsieur President Macron's
bedfellows is such a great word for that segment alone.
I know. It was a pun intended. Lawsuit against Candace Owens, as well as the fate of Vinay Prasad, and just try to get to some of the bottom of that and the issues involved in both. And then we'll have a sunlight section that Rebecca and I actually both had the same woman on the mind, which many people have had this week. So we'll get to that, and we'll finish with our sunburns. So, Rebecca, let me just I'll start off and just say the first thing about this shooting is all murders like this are senseless. All murders are horrific. This feels especially so. It hits close to home for us New Yorkers, for us Midtowners. And I'm of course referring to the shooting at the Blackstone offices. This individual drove across the country, obviously had mental disturbances, and opened fire in a lobby. And then, kind of went upstairs and killed some more folks. And, we're learning now was looking for the NFL headquarters. He never played in the NFL. He alleged brain injury, that he couldn't have known whether he suffered or not. So just an awful day in Manhattan. It seems, that every time, in the kind of high summer, it always feels like there's these awful kind of stories here in the city, So I guess one question, is there a larger lesson here? I mean, it played out in terms of the mayor's race, with Mamdani was at his wedding extravaganza in Uganda, and now is back, but had thoughts, and as well as violence in other cities, which is starting to get picked up and noticed as well. So, did you have any initial thoughts, Rebecca?
Well, I just want to point out that to say that Mamdani had thoughts regarding this is to give him way too much credit. He just had the typical reaction, which is we have to ban guns because guns shoot themselves. He's an unserious person on this subject and most subjects, and so I wouldn't really take his.
Yeah, I think it's also worth pointing out, as I think was reported, in the Post, to give him the credit, part of Mamdani's plan would have eliminated the very police unit that responded, to this shooting. He's also indicated that whole swaths of law enforcement should be, folded into kind of these community care advocates or whatever the hell those are.
Right.
And, and again, we've talked about this so much on this show, Rebecca, and, if you had a really strong alternative, this could have, I think, been a moment to really land some punches, rhetorically speaking, on Mamdani. Right. I mean, this is the kind of, October, 3 a.m. telephone moment that Mark Penn spoke to us about. Right. Who do you want at the controls? And it just felt like, that didn't really and the guy's in Uganda. Right. And doesn't run back.
This is why he's up in the polls.
He's tweeting from a compound in Uganda, while Midtown has its worst mass shooting in decades. I mean, just a farce, an utter farce.
Right. Sort of shades of Karen Bass. I'm here in Malibu, in Los Angeles. She was, in Africa also, when the fires were breaking out here, and couldn't be bothered to come home.
And not to mention, his past tweets about police, which are just, unbelievably antagonistic. Yeah. And, but just to show kind of what an agile politician he is, I think, or whatever, or a kind of charlatan, is he says, my opponents are talking about tweets. I care about people. And, so it's this sleight of hand, right? And this total kind of brushing off of his past positions on this stuff.
Yeah, I'm, I never thought I'd be sort of saying that I'm safely sitting in LA while things are happening in New York. I guess I looked at this from a distance and thought, this is more than just politics, right? This is a deeply cultural and spiritual problem in this country that nobody wants to talk about because it's just much easier to say ban guns or whatever people say in these moments. I made a little list of some of the violent attacks that have shocked the nation in the last couple of weeks, including this one. And here's just what I came up with off the top of my head. I didn't even have to use AI for this, right? There was the beating in Cincinnati of the couple by the Black youth, or I guess they were in their 20s and 30s, where, amongst other, things that happened there, a grown man punched a woman in the face and knocked her out. There was this New York shooting in which women were killed by a madman. There was the LA daycare center attack where a guy just shot in front of an actual daycare center 2 women. I think they didn't die, luckily, but right near where kids are being, cared for. There was a stabbing spree in Michigan in that parking lot, right? An 85-year-old man was stabbed, amongst many others. And In New York City, just yesterday, I think it was, a man kicked a dog to death and burnt its
Mm.
body, and then he was summarily released by police. So, what do I see as the thread through in all of this? You know, maybe you're old enough, I'm certainly old enough to remember when children and the elderly were protected by society. And we live in a world now, in a country now, where they're targeted. There's something deeply wrong with the way our society has broken down, and we've accepted levels of violence, people being set on fire. You
Yeah.
wouldn't really know the difference between American cities and, I don't know, Bangladesh, not to pick on Bangladesh, but third world countries where this kind of stuff happens all the time. We are now a third world country where this kind of stuff happens all the
Yeah.
time in our urban centers. And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily that it's more than it has been before or not. It's the lack of outrage um, at the viciousness of these attacks, at the kinds of people who are being attacked, and most of all, the fact that there are no consequences typically,
Yeah.
unless there's a major public outcry, as in Cincinnati. There really wasn't much that the authorities were seeming to want to do about it until everybody said, how in the world could this happen? So these are stories of cultural and societal breakdown. And on a mass scale, on a spiritual level, in some sense, I'm using that word, deliberately. And I think there's no, gun policy that's going to correct it.
Yeah. Okay, there's a lot more to say, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as the story of New York and of the election moves forward. But we have another big story today, and that is the sort of rapid fire recognition of a Palestinian state by different countries. France took the lead. UK has now threatened the same. Canada has threatened the same. So, if we zoom out a little bit, I think these are diplomatic setbacks for Israel, Israel is in I think a tough spot. I think some of the administration's patience seems to be wearing thin as well. So. Listen, I think these recognition of Palestinian state are ridiculous. I can say I'm the tooth fairy. It doesn't mean I am. But as a sign of Israel's maybe sort of losing ground, I worry about it. I worry about it, Rebecca. And I think that figuring out a path forward here where Israel can go on the offensive diplomatically and in terms of soft power is pretty important at this moment. But what do you make of it?
Yeah, look, this idea of a two-state solution, it's been dead for a long time, but it never seems to die. It's an industry. It's not a solution to anything. It's just now become a meme, an industry, a way for people to make money. Sort of reminds me of aid to Gaza. It just was not about the actual feeding or assistance to people who are suffering. It was about who was going to make money off of it. And I think the two-state solution is sort of similarly positioned. It's the thing that people say, and it's the thing that people have built livelihoods off of.
Yeah.
It's just entirely impractical, right? How old is Abbas right now? The head of the Palestinian Authority, 89. He's not going to be here for long. What happens when he goes? Who's the head of this Palestinian state? Gaza is still polling well amongst Palestinians.
Hamas.
Or where, right? Who is it and where is it? It's almost a metaphysical idea. It doesn't exist. Right.
Right.
There's been no institution building. I do think Israel needs to think about who governs Gaza. We talk about the day after or the day of, but what seems to me is there's a real a vacuum that right now, I think it's in Israel's interest to figure out how to kind of move on from that. Even
what do you think happens at the UN, assembly in the fall, and they're gonna, if they do if France and England and others come out, Canada, and say we recognize a Palestinian state, right? What do you think the impact will be then, and where does the story go from there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's one road in which, nothing much happens. It's not much different. Will they then view, let's say, Israel's military operations in Gaza as a war against another member state? I mean, that seems hard to imagine. But diplomatic tides can turn pretty quickly, and I don't think all is lost for Israel. I think this gap gives them some space. I think the fundamentals of Saudi recognition, Syria normalization are still there. But it's I sometimes wish we had like an Abba Eben, I don't know. I mean, so I think some kind of like really, statesman-like visionary who can sort of see what the possibilities are, on the diplomatic front. But
I just want to also point out that, much is being made about the Arab League's recognition that there were atrocities on October 7th, and to which we should all be saying, yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah,
We knew that already. You're a little late to the party.
Yeah.
That's not enough of a concession to get Israel to give up East Jerusalem and acknowledge it as occupied territory. These are fantasies. This whole conversation is a fantasy. There are no partners for a two-state solution on either side for very different reasons at the moment.
And let me just also say, this idea of using the two-state, recognizing the Palestinian as a threat is just outrageous. I mean, like the UK and Canada are doing. I mean, if you really think that there's a state, there, then just recognize it. This idea that somehow, unless Israel is good, we're going to recognize it. I mean, it just shows you it's not a serious state-building enterprise. It's a cudgel to whack Israel around.
Right, to mollify perhaps the large and very agitated Muslim populations in places like France and England. It's self-serving. It's not about the Palestinians. It's not about peace. It might be about peace within their own borders. And so I don't know how anybody takes it seriously, but I don't think it's not important that, Europe in particular is moving in this direction. It's not helpful for Israel, and it's
and of course, it emboldens Hamas. I mean, and it's we've seen Hamas refusing to negotiate, walking away, and the combination of this plus the humanitarian pressure on Israel is sort of gives Hamas everything it needs not to come to the table. Okay, well, there's far more to say, but let's move on to the Make It Make Sense section. And we have this kind of wild lawsuit that speaking of the Fifth Republic, that the president of France has now filed against Candace Owens for calling his wife Brigitte a man. It's in a court in Delaware. Hard to imagine, Macron walking into, some shabby court in Wilmington. It's kind of an amazing image. I don't think he'll appear in person. But what I'll say about this is two things, Rebecca. One is that, proving defamation against a public figure is really hard. So in this sense, Candace Owens, starts on first or second base, right? You have to show actual malice. Either the person lied or was so reckless it was as if they lied. And that's hard to do. Sarah Palin couldn't do it against the New York Times. It's a really high bar. There's been talk of repealing it, but it's still Supreme Court law. So, we get into this question of, does Candace Owens really believe or not believe? So it's hard to prove intent, I guess, is what I'm saying. And it's hard to prove that someone knew that they were lying. The other thing I'd say, though, is, there are kind of downsides here for Macron besides just losing. I mean, anytime you file a suit, you're open to discovery, you're open to different kinds of requests for evidence. It reminds me a little bit of sort of the Oscar Wilde case, where in reality he never should have sued and never and so I don't know. I think it's kind of a strange move. It's not clear Macron needs the money. It's not clear that this really is going to tamp down this stuff. In fact, it feels set to amplify it. But it's certainly a great. I mean, Macron's v. Owens is just a great case, a great caption.
Yeah, it's good fun, I guess. One could imagine that Candace Owens might be right in this case, although I don't want to get sued for saying it.
Yeah, I was going to say, be careful. Yeah.
My bigger issue is, like, who cares if Brigitte Macron is a man or a woman? I think it's much more shocking, and people seem to gloss over the fact that she/he, I don't know, she was 39 when she first started up with a 15-year-old boy. And that to me seems much more scandalous and worrisome. And that isn't the subject of more scrutiny is really the problem. But I wanted to ask you, just technically, does it matter at all in a legal sense that he's a head of state filing this suit? Are there limitations to discovery, or is there anything different about the case because of that?
Yeah. That's a great question. Obviously it's come up in the context, in Trump's context, right? Because Trump has also filed these suits, right, against CBS, ABC, but also has appealed his verdicts. And there's this interesting question of sort of like, can a head of state, waive their own immunity, so to speak, right? And I think a foreign head of state, I'm not sure, it's a civil case. But by filing a lawsuit in America, you're subject to American law, right? That's the thing, is like what's going to govern this case is American civil law, not French law. So that's sort of what I mean, is he's putting himself, I won't say at the mercy. I mean, it's not a criminal case, but he's putting himself in the sphere of American jurisdiction, right? So it's sort of strange, and like we said, I mean, doesn't he have enough to worry about? But we'll see. Owens has been defiant and says is not backing down. I sent a note to the Elysee Palace asking for comment, and they said this is a private matter. So, I guess it is.
Also that he request a jury trial,
right?
Which I thought might have been a really bad move, because I can imagine a jury would be more amenable to siding with her than him. Yeah. And also, did he file this lawsuit on is he the plaintiff or is his wife? And can you file a suit like this?
They both are. They're co-defendants.
They both are. Okay.
Yeah. The argument is that asking for that the sort of rumors or has hurt both of them. Again, but it's a good point, Rebecca, to say, this isn't the most sympathetic plaintiff in the world as he sits in in Versailles, kind of, we'll see. Okay, let's go over to a less glamorous but important, but more important story, and that's Vinay Prasad at the FDA, who was fired. Laura Loomer is claiming credit for that scalp. What do you make of this? We're seeing different kind of different reports, and some people say good riddance, others say this was a good man who lost his job. What do you make of that personnel?
Yeah, look, there are two things to say here for me. One is just the Laura Loomer, focus on Dr. Prasad's history as a progressive. He's self-described as a progressive. He has said that he voted for Bernie Sanders. He's made negative comments about Donald Trump. And so she made a lot about that. And to me, that's a big so what, right? There are a lot of people in this administration who were not fans of Donald Trump and then sort of changed their tune. In this case, specifically, it was COVID-19 policy during the Biden administration that really Dr. Prasad objected to and was very vocal about. And it's one of the reasons that RFK Jr., asked him to come on in this role. He was the head of Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research at the FDA. And so it doesn't really matter if he's an open borders kind of guy. He wasn't put in charge of that policy. He was really in charge, in this case, the most relevant fact is that he was in charge of things like, vaccine policy and the sort of approval process for new drugs. And that's really where the controversy comes in. And, his critics would say that he was sort of slow rolling the approval process on various drugs, where the FDA was promising to kind of move more quickly and not get bogged down in these multi-year approvals for somewhat experimental drugs that really could potentially be life-saving. And I think they're really just different arguments here, and I'm not even sure where I fall on them. I mean, there was a specific case here that Dr. Prasad was looking at a medicine that was being used for a certain type of muscular dystrophy that disproportionately affected young men. It was really brutal, the disease. It is a very brutal disease. And the medication that was being, sort of delayed, let's say, by Dr. Prasad's policies, had killed a few people, but it also helped. And so there's one school of thought, which is...
Yeah, I mean, if a medicine kills a few people, I mean, that's pretty bad.
Right.
I mean,
well, so did the COVID vaccines, but nobody seemed to care. But okay, you have you have a responsibility, I think, in his position to point that out and to say, wait, right? On the other hand, there are people who might know that fact if it were transparent to the public and say, but this condition is going to kill me or is going to reduce my life to the point where I'd rather take my chances. And so that's the argument really about FDA approvals. And so there are all these theories about big pharma having control over him or not having control over him. I wouldn't be in a position to know, but I don't think that it's wrong. I just want to point out one other quick thing. There's also this issue of cost. This medicine was costing about $3.2 million per dosage, and taxpayers effectively would have to absorb that cost. Should taxpayers be paying for these experimental drugs that may or may not work on people? And then the question is, but is it fair to just say that a patient, has to absorb that cost? They can't possibly pay for it. So it brings up the other question of why in the world did the drugs cost this much and who should be paying for them? These were all issues that Dr. Prasad brought up. And, Loomer was successful in sort of pressuring the administration into his, firing / he has to go spend more time with his family.
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, I think what's important to say is the issue of approval for drugs is a fraught topic, far preceding Dr. Prasad. I mean, this is, it's you get why, as you so eloquently laid out. I mean, how do you weigh all these factors? I do think, though, the issue would be, was he making reasonable decisions that people could disagree with, right? Within the bounds of that, or not. And as you said, I don't think Laura Loomer should be the person who's, as you say, was blatantly political. And so, that's, I think, not a great way to go about deciding, whether he should have his job or not. As you said, based on past affiliations that the administration knew when they hired him, right? I mean, this wasn't a secret. There was a sort of an op-ed in the Journal that called him a one-man death panel. I mean, that seems to me, well, yeah, people do have to make these decisions. I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me that if you're within the realm of thoughtful, reasoned research, decisions, these decisions, they are life and death decisions, I guess, and they're really hard calls. And from all accounts, he was a thoughtful, brilliant person, and wish him well.
Yeah, he still is. He just won't be that person at the FDA.
Yeah. Okay. Our Sunlight story is a story that I think has gotten a fair amount of play, but I found, and we both found, really interesting, and that is the Sydney Sweeney ad campaign for American Eagle, Good Genes.
Did you know who she was before this controversy?
Yeah,
I did not.
Of course.
No, not of course. I had no idea who she was. Okay.
You mean
but she does have good genes, that I know.
My possible wife, yeah. But no, so she was on Euphoria and other movies, and it is really I think a story of kind of, I don't know what you want to say, upward mobility, success. I mean, has gone from a kind of a sex symbol to a really powerful figure, an actress, and a good actress, honestly, and talented one. I'm sure people listening have seen the ads. They're about jeans. They're just great ads. I mean, obviously she's beautiful and hot, but they're memorable. That tagline is kind of provocative and fun and interesting, I think. And billboards here all over the city. So I saw when I saw that ad initially, I was like, wow, that's an ad. And it's it's done obviously bonkers for American Eagle stock price and its value and all of that. So
I'm laughing because I feel like men have to, it's sort of like they read Playboy for the articles. Like you have to point to the, the ad and the quality of the ad. But like, as a woman, I'm just going to say the ad was good because she's just hot. She's a beautiful woman who does have good genes, both spellings. And that's why women and men like to look at the ad, and that's okay. And that's the point, is that it's okay. This sort of so-called backlash seems to me like a media manufactured backlash. I don't think there was backlash. I think most people like you and I looked at that woman and said, wow, she's beautiful. Just as we would have looked at, like, I don't know, Halle Berry and said, wow, she's beautiful. This had nothing to do with race, but the media loves to make everything about race. And they found the people who would go on and talk about race. And so there you have your controversy, but no controversy about it. 99 out of 100 women would love to look like Sydney Sweeney for a day. What I worry about, well, first of all, let me say what I celebrate is that, all this so-called backlash is really just the sound of DEI's death rattle. And I love it. And I want more. This is, the DEI guys going down. They can't stand it. And that's the only, sort of backlash that I saw. And what I worry about, though, is that when you think about it, there is a generation now, maybe two, of young people who've been marinated in this kind of DEI nonsense, and who can't just look at an ad and just say, wow, that girl's hot. Because there feels like there's something wrong with saying that, because she might be white, or she might be skinny, or she might be whatever that's not, DEI seal of approval. So I just want to bring back the right to just look at a girl and say, wow, she's good looking. And that's reason enough for me to want to buy those jeans.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. I think as a casual student of popular culture, it's really interesting. I mean, what makes an ad break through? Why did this one break through? I think, obviously it's her, but I do think, that the touching of a cultural nerve was really well done and really smart, and sort of a good weather vane for kind of where things are now. I agree. It's just great. It's just great. And I think it would have been great if it were Beyonce saying she had good genes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, but the confluence of these things, and good for Sydney Sweeney for doing it. I think a lot of actresses wouldn't have done an ad like this. And again, I think the good genes in particular, I think.
I wonder if going in, people like Sydney Sweeney, I don't know her at all, but I wonder if she even thought about this genes with the G kind of implications. I think it's only the DEI obsessed who would have looked at that and had some reaction to it, like, maybe I shouldn't say that, as if being white and blonde haired and blue eyed, is a bad thing for which one has to apologize. I mean, that idea is a DEI idea. It's not true. And so only those who've been sort of captured by that idea over the last generation or two would have pause. Someone my age looked at that, and it took me a minute, because I just thought, what's wrong with that?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's right. And I think it was obviously, she's stunning. It was clever. And it was just fun. So Sydney, we'd love to see more of you. Okay.
Especially. Call Ari. I'll give you his phone number if you contact me.
If you're listening. Okay, great. It's time for our sunburns. I'll lead off if that's okay. I'm just gonna. This has gotten a lot of coverage. I won't pile on necessarily. But I think the sort of New York Times quasi correction of their cover story is a moment to sort of stop and pause a little bit in a week, I think, where there was a lot of crazy around the coverage of Israel and the coverage of Gaza. We have an editorial out, saying, there was this heartbreaking picture for sure, but the truth is more complicated than what you're being told. This child had a pre-existing condition. The point is not to say that children aren't suffering or this child isn't suffering at all. The point is to say that as a news organization, you have to be careful. You have to not launder stories from Hamas as fact. This picture on the front page of the New York Times made a huge deal. I really believe, in terms of some of the political pressure Israel's facing, and not even political pressure, just in changing hearts and minds. The Times had a kind of lukewarm, not even a retraction or correction, kind of neither here nor there. At least they did something. That came from pressure from fact checkers and kind of independent media and people who said there's more to the story here. How it was discovered is its own fascinating kind of story. But in response, the pro-Palestinian people threw red paint on the New York Times building because they thought that even apologizing or even clarifying was too much. So obviously nothing will be good enough for those extremists. Any acknowledgement of complexity or of nuance, any acknowledgement that this is not all Israel's fault is totally verboten. But I see among people I know and in the discourse more generally, the use of slogans has just become so pervasive around this issue, and specifically the use of the word genocide, which I think is totally poisoning the conversation. I think it's meant to ostracize Jews. It's meant to ostracize Israel. It's used specifically because of there's a thrill in calling Jews genocidaires. It's to see it adopted by more and more people is one of the most depressing and defamatory linguistic developments in my lifetime. And it just needs to be repudiated and refuted.
I think we should probably cover next time. Let's talk about the Mearsheimer interview on Tucker Carlson's podcast, because he loves the word genocide, and I'd love to break that down with you. I think it's just also quickly interesting that the New York Times has often laundered Hamas propaganda on its pages, but this was the moment that it chose to kind of make this acknowledgement that it got it wrong. And it's interesting that it was over an image, which just speaks to the power of images, even over the word. And so, there's a lesson to be learned for that from both sides. Okay, my sunburn has to do with the UCLA settlement with the 3 Jewish students and Jewish professor who had filed a lawsuit against the school because the school did not protect them when, at the height of the sort of anti-Israel agitation on campus. There were spaces on campus that were deemed off limits to identifiably Jewish people, and even sort of security paid for by the administration kind of participated in the blocking of these Jewish students from certain spaces on campus, a complete infringement on their rights. And that part of the lawsuit I couldn't be more in agreement with. I'm glad they brought the suit, and they won/got a settlement from UCLA. Settlement was $6.4 million. My sunburn, though, is on the $2.3 million that went from that settlement to 8 Jewish organizations who claim to be fighting anti-Semitism. And I sort of put that in air quotes because some of them are and some of them not so much. But even the ones who are, I think, like organizations like Chabad on campus are terrific. In my personal opinion, I think organizations like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, are not terrific. But they all got a large chunk of money from this settlement, more, by the way, than did the actual plaintiffs, who each got $50,000 each. So all the rest of that money went to lawyers and to these organizations. This just smacks to me of like BLM, Rainbow Push Coalition kind of environmentalist group grift. It's like the leveraging of, in some cases, manufactured, in some cases, like this case, real abuses for personal financial gain. And I don't like to see Jewish organizations participating in this. The money should have gone to the plaintiffs. They were the ones who were harmed. The ADL was not harmed in this case. They don't deserve a payout. And if Jewish organizations get into this business of taking advantage of these moments, they will not be taken seriously going forward when they involve themselves in very real cases. And I think we've already seen that in situations like with organizations like the ADL in particular. They've created a pretty bad name for themselves for this reason and others. And I think that we should avoid this at all costs. It does the Jewish and pro-Israel cause no good. So I'd rather see millions of dollars go to those Jewish students. And let's keep fighting these fights. I like these lawsuits when civil rights violations occur. But this is not a fundraising opportunity for Jewish organizations.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, we'll see where, how the $200 million that Columbia is paying. And reports are that Harvard is in discussions for some $500 million. Like it'll be a good idea to keep an eye on that money and see where it goes.
Yes. And maybe just to put a finer point on that too, just to end this, is like, there's that Modi comedian joke about, the sending the anti-Semitist to the Holocaust Museum and giving him good ideas. A lot of these sort of anti-Semitism programs that are meant to teach people how not to be anti-Semites range from not working to creating the problem that they're designed to try to solve for. I don't know of too many of these programs that actually turn people's anti-Semitic lives around. So it's not even money well spent.
There's a whole big debate, and about does Holocaust education work? And one of my mentors, Ruth Weiss, and others, Jonathan Rosen, who's a friend of ours, wrote a great piece that years ago, and saying against the Holocaust Museum. I mean, we're not against Holocaust museums, but clearly that model of anti-Semitism training, I think, look at where we are now. So the results speak for themselves. Rebecca, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Great to see you. Bye.